Hello, my name's Ingrid. Do you have a few minutes? I'm guessing almost every one of us has been approached in a shopping center, movie theater, or even a park and asked to complete a questionnaire. Survey research using questionnaires may be the most commonly used research method in outdoor recreation and social science as a whole. People underestimate the skill and challenge involved in constructing a good questionnaire. In this module, we hope to share with you some best practices for questionnaire design, questionnaire administration, as well as provide some practice evaluating and writing questions. Your texts provide a wonderful foundation for this, and we'll give you the opportunity to evaluate a questionnaire according to recommendations in this presentation and your texts. So of course you want to know when to use questionnaires. Questionnaires are usually used in the second phase of a research project following some informal or formal observation or conversations about issues of interest. For example, a few years ago, a manager from Ramsey County Parks and Recreation observed there was this new user group in the area. He informally observed their behavior and decided he wanted to know more about them. So he came to the university and we developed and administered a questionnaire to provide details on the questions he had about their preferences, their behaviors, and their origin. Similarly, in my more recent work at Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore, we spent a season observing visitors to understand their behavior and then used that information to inform the development of a questionnaire that we administered this summer, and it addressed key management issues. Questionnaires aren't always appropriate, however. Remember that the method needs to match the question being asked. Questionnaires are best used when the information you're seeking is fairly straightforward and you're not seeking a great deal of meaning in the desired responses. You won't get deep description and depth in a questionnaire. And if that is your goal, you would be better served using interviews or focus groups. So the next thing to consider is the population of interest, and is it capable and interested in completing a questionnaire? For example, young children have limited ability to complete questionnaires as they can't read, and you need to adjust the response categories accordingly. Alternatively, questionnaires may not be culturally appropriate for your group, and in these cases, interviews or focus groups may be more appropriate to get done what you need. Further, recent immigrants may not have sufficient English skills to be comfortable to complete a questionnaire in English. So focus groups or interviews may be a better choice, or you could translate the questionnaire. Also, if you did focus groups or interviews, you would need a translator as well. Your texts focus on the advantages and disadvantages of different types of questionnaires, and it includes a great comprehensive table in the reading by Vasky. I'll share just a few highlights here. On-site questionnaires afford direct access to the population you're seeking and pretty immediate access to the data itself. However, they take a lot of time and money to administer. Depending on your site and population, you may get very few completed questionnaires per hour and therefore have to do a lot of staffing. Or the weather can preclude data collection and force you to reschedule or risk low sample sizes. Now, telephone questionnaires or interviews can reach a variety of people across a great geography pretty quickly. Telephone questionnaires are also fairly expensive, however, and are limited in the complexity of the questions that you can ask. Recent estimates as of 2017 indicate you should plan on about $125 per completed telephone interview with the general population. In a recent telephone survey I worked on, we requested a supplement to the general population of non-white respondents, and it added 30% to our estimated costs. Mail questionnaires do allow for complex questions and can reach a breadth of people, but they do take more time than on-site or telephone to administer the questions and get the data. Typically, you're looking at maybe 6 to 8 weeks for data collection with all the mailing procedures of a pre-notice, the questionnaire itself, and reminders. You also need to consider incentives to encourage people to participate, their costs, and how to administer them. Similarly, internet questionnaires allow for complex questions and have a lower cost to administer than mail questionnaires. However, not everyone has access to the internet at this point, so that's something you need to consider. Certainly each of these types of survey administration have its benefits in terms of time, cost, and money, and type of questions allowed. But the most important part in making your decision about how to administer the questions is the type of information you need, followed by the constraints of your budget. Your readings indicate a set of guidelines for both the questions and the questionnaire. You'll be asked to use them when you evaluate a questionnaire, and we want you to use them when you develop your own questionnaire for the practicum. I'm going to highlight a few and add a couple in this presentation. So the content of the questions emanates directly from the purpose. Beware, you can get caught up in creating a lot of questions that would provide interesting information, but perhaps are peripheral to the project. You'll find there are so many interesting parts of a project, you'll really want to ask those questions. However, make sure the questions you ask directly address the purpose of the project. Also important to consider is the level of measurement you'll want to use for each question. Nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio, or NOR, as I refer to it. This is probably a little bit of review from some statistics class that you had. So for example, you could ask someone their age or how old they are by asking them if they consider themselves young or old, a nominal categorization. Or you could ask them what generation they belong to, Gen Y, Gen X, and the like, and order them. That would be ordinal. You could also ask them to categorize themselves in age groups by decade, which would be interval, or you could just simply ask them, how old are you? I strongly encourage you to use the highest level of the NOR continuum as possible. Why? Well, because it expands the type of analysis you can do and the questions you can answer. You can always collapse data into smaller categories. If you ask an open-ended question, you can make it into segments of 5 or 10 years. But if you ask 10 years, you're stuck with that. Also, the good news is that there are many resources for you when you're developing questions and you don't have to start with scratch. Make sure you start with good examples from journal articles. There are also lists of government-approved questions with the Office of Management and Budget. So those questions are good to use from a comparative standpoint because you can compare with other questions, although sometimes the questions may not be exactly what you need. And of course, when we want strong scales with high reliability and validity, there are some good reference books, for example, with the Psychological Association that we can use. Once you have all of your questions, you need to decide what order they should go in. A few helpful hints. First, make sure that the first question is not too difficult. Ensures the participant that they can and should respond and that they're interested in the content. For example, you could ask them how long have they been participating in an activity or been visiting a site. Then move on to the heart or meat of the survey, the key topics you really need to know. Keep the less interesting information at the end, especially the demographics. An easy sign that someone is new to questionnaire development is that they put the demographics at the beginning. How boring. Don't do that. If appropriate, you might include a comment section. Whatever questions you have, do group them by topic area. For example, you'll want to have a section perhaps on past visits as well as a section on the current visit. Finally, make sure to thank them at the end. It's also important to provide them any sort of contact information for the project leader or principal investigator. In fact, any projects done through the university require that. Let the respondents know if and when the results will be public. Once the questionnaire is drafted, yes, you can breathe a sigh of relief, but you need to take the next important step, and that is to pre-test the questionnaire. This is to ensure that people understand the questions and that you have the right number of choices to respond. So the pretest takes the questionnaire and presents it in the format you're using to a sample of respondents that mirror or are actually your target population. Not only do they complete the questionnaire, but you also ask them for their input about the clarity of the questions, the wording, and any ease of answering. So go and find 20 people who are like or are even part of the population you're targeting. For example, for the Pictured Rocks project, I found people who had visited Pictured Rocks and asked them to complete the pretest. When you ask them to complete the questionnaire, check their answers. Is there sufficient variation in the questions you've asked? For example, if you have a 5-point scale, are all the answers in 4 and 5 such that you might want to think about expanding it to a 7-point scale? Ask the people themselves, did they understand everything? Were questions vague or uncertain? And if they were, you need to consider rewriting them. Also, were there places where people were adding a category to a question response? For example, if you asked what activities people engaged in, did you see a lot of people adding inline skating or stand-up paddleboarding? If so, you might want to add that response to the questionnaire because that will save your time later when you code it. A couple of recent experiences I've had with pretesting made a big difference. In a wildlife viewing survey, the employment question we had did not include an option for retired. And that was critical because a number of the people who we surveyed were in fact retired, and that has implications for their income level. So that was important. And in another project, we realized that when we asked people where they were from, we didn't include another country. We just had the US states. So that was an issue. And we also did not have a category for marital status that included cohabitating. So we added that. So these were some important additions from a pretest. So we have highlighted some key steps in questionnaire development, and your text provides significantly more information. I'm hopeful that after reviewing this and completing your readings, you now appreciate the resources and expertise required to create and implement effective questionnaires, and that in the future, you'll be able to positively contribute to the questionnaire population. Do note that there are many resources and consultants who can help in this area, including the U of M's Center for Survey Research. So do take some time, apply your newfound knowledge, evaluate the questionnaire that's part of your assignment, and apply this to the questionnaire you design. I look forward to seeing your good ideas.